She was the girl no one looked at twice, the one they whispered about, laughed at, dismissed without a second thought. Eliza Harper had learned to make herself small, invisible, silent. But when a dangerous stranger walked into her life and saw something no one else could see, everything changed. He didn't come to rescue her. He came to fight beside her. And when outlaws tore through Dead Willow with fire and blood, the girl everyone underestimated became the woman no one would ever forget. This is a story about survival, courage, and the kind of love that doesn't ask you to be perfect. It just asks you to be real. Stay with me until the end, and if this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey goes. The autumn wind cut through Dead Willow like a blade, rattling the shutters of Harper's General Store and carrying the scent of dust and dry timber. Eliza Harper stood behind the counter, hands folded in front of her apron, eyes fixed on the ledger she'd been pretending to read for the past 20 minutes. She wasn't really reading, she was listening. Outside, voices drifted in through the cracked window, Mrs. Callahan and her daughter, passing by on their way to the dressmaker's shop. "Poor thing," Mrs. Callahan said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Still running that store all by herself. You'd think someone would have taken pity by now." Her daughter laughed, sharp and mean. "Pity? Mama, look at her. She's plain as a fence post. No man's gonna—" Eliza turned the page loudly, cutting off the rest. She didn't need to hear it. She'd heard it 100 times before. 1,000. Plain, awkward, unmarriageable. She closed the ledger and moved to the shelf behind her, reorganizing jars of preserves that didn't need reorganizing. Her hands shook slightly, but she steadied them. She'd gotten good at that over the years, steadying herself when the world tried to shake her apart. Dead Willow wasn't a kind town. It was rough, remote, perched on the edge of the frontier where civilization frayed into wilderness. The people here were hard because they had to be. There was no room for softness, no patience for weakness. And Eliza, with her quiet voice and downcast eyes, had been labeled weak a long time ago. She was 23 years old and alone. Her parents had died 3 winters back, her father from pneumonia, her mother 6 months later from what the doctor called a broken heart, but what Eliza knew was just exhaustion. They'd left her the store, a small house on the edge of town, and a reputation she couldn't escape. The bell above the door jangled. Eliza turned, forcing a polite smile onto her face. "Afternoon? How can I—" She stopped. The man standing in the doorway wasn't from Dead Willow. That much was clear immediately. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn leather and dark wool that looked like it had seen 1,000 miles of rough country. His hair was long, tied back loosely, streaked with sun and dirt. His face was weathered, lined in a way that spoke of years spent outdoors, exposed to wind and cold, and something harder than weather. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They were steady, calm, the kind of eyes that didn't look away. "Need some supplies," he said. His voice was low, rough around the edges, but not unkind. Eliza blinked, realizing she'd been staring. "Of course. What do you need?" He pulled a scrap of paper from his coat pocket and handed it to her. His fingers were scarred, calloused, the hands of someone who worked with them every day. She scanned the list: flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, rope. Standard provisions for someone heading into the backcountry. "I can get all of this together for you," she said quietly. "It'll take a few minutes." "That's fine." He didn't move to browse the store. He just stood there, watching her in a way that wasn't invasive or uncomfortable, just present, like he was actually seeing her. Eliza moved quickly, pulling items from shelves, weighing flour into a burlap sack, counting out boxes of cartridges. She was used to working alone, used to the silence, but this silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was full of something she couldn't name. "You run this place yourself?" he asked after a moment. She glanced up. "Yes, that's a lot of work. I manage." He nodded slowly, like he understood something she hadn't said. "I'm Rowan Vale." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "Eliza Harper." "Eliza." He repeated her name like he was testing the weight of it. "You been here long?" "My whole life." "Family?" "Gone." She said it flatly, without emotion, because that was the only way she knew how to say it. If she let herself feel it, she'd crack, and she couldn't afford to crack in front of a stranger. Rowan's expression shifted slightly, something softer, almost like recognition. "I'm sorry." "It's all right." She turned back to the counter, stacking the supplies neatly. "That'll be $4.30. He pulled out a worn leather pouch and counted out the coins, placing them carefully on the counter. His hand brushed hers briefly as he did, and she pulled back instinctively, heat rushing to her face. "Thank you," he said. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He gathered the supplies, slinging the sack over his shoulder with ease. But instead of leaving, he paused at the door, looking back at her. "You take care of yourself, Eliza Harper." And then he was gone. Eliza stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway, her heart beating faster than it should have been. She told herself it didn't mean anything. He was just passing through. She'd probably never see him again. But 2 days later, he came back. She was sweeping the front step when she saw him walking down the main street, the same steady stride, the same quiet presence. Her stomach flipped. He stopped in front of her. "Morning." "Morning," she managed. "Need a few more things." She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. This time he took his time, moving through the aisles slowly, picking up items and setting them down again. He asked her questions, small ones, easy ones. Where did the coffee come from? Did she stock much in the way of tools? How long had the store been here? She answered, her voice still quiet but less uncertain. He listened like her answers actually mattered. When he paid and left, she realized she'd been smiling. He came back 3 days later, then 4 days after that. Then again. Each time he bought something small, tobacco, a new knife, lamp oil. Each time he stayed a little longer, and each time Eliza found herself waiting for the sound of the bell above the door. The town noticed, of course. Dead Willow noticed everything. "Who's that man always hanging around the Harper girl?" Mrs. Callahan asked loudly outside the store one afternoon, her voice pitched to Carrie. "Mountain man, I heard," someone else replied. "Lives up in the high country. No wife, no family. Strange type." "What's he want with her?" Laughter. "Maybe he's desperate." Eliza's hands tightened on the broom handle. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying over things like that years ago. But when Rowan came in that evening, something must have shown on her face because he paused, studying her. "You all right?" "Fine." He didn't look convinced. "People talk too much in this town." She looked up sharply. "You heard them?" "Hard not to." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Doesn't mean they're right. They think—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Never mind. They think I've got no business talking to you," he said bluntly. "And they think you've got no business talking to me." Her cheeks burned. "Something like that." "You care what they think?" She faltered. The truth was, she did. She'd spent her whole life caring what they thought, letting their words shape how she saw herself. But standing here, with Rowan looking at her like she was worth listening to, she felt something shift. "I don't know," she said honestly. He nodded. "That's fair." "Why do you keep coming back?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He didn't answer right away. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Because you don't look at me like I'm something to be afraid of," he said finally. "And because you make good coffee." She laughed, an actual surprise laugh that startled them both. Rowan smiled, just a little. "There it is." "What?" "First time I've seen you smile like that." Eliza looked down, flustered. "I should close up. It's getting late." "Let me walk you home." "You don't have to." "I know." He straightened, waiting. She hesitated, then nodded. They walked in silence through the darkening streets. Dead Willow was quiet this time of evening, most people already indoors. Eliza was acutely aware of how close Rowan was, the solid presence of him beside her. When they reached her small house at the edge of town, she stopped at the gate. "Thank you," she said. "Any time." She turned to go, then paused. "Rowan?" "Yeah?" "Why are you really here, in Dead Willow, I mean? You don't seem like the type to stay in one place." His jaw tightened slightly. For the first time, she saw something guarded in his expression. "Had a life up in the high country once," he said quietly. "Lost it. Been drifting since. I'm sorry." Don't be. That's just how it goes sometimes. He tipped his head toward her house. Get inside. It's cold. She did, but she watched from the window as he walked away, his figure disappearing into the shadows. Over the next few weeks, Rowan became a fixture in Eliza's life. He didn't just visit the store. He started helping. He fixed the loose board on the front step. He repaired the lock on the back door that had been broken for months. He hauled heavy crates she couldn't lift and restocked shelves without being asked. At first, she protested. You don't have to do this. I know. I can manage on my own. I know that too. But he kept showing up, and eventually she stopped arguing. They fell into an easy rhythm. He'd arrive in the mornings, help her open the store, stay through the afternoon. They talked while they worked, about small things at first, the weather, the state of the road, the best way to brew coffee, but slowly the conversations deepened. You ever think about leaving? Rowan asked one day, sitting on the counter while she counted inventory. Eliza looked up. Dead willow? Yeah, sometimes. She set down her pencil. But where would I go? I don't know anywhere else. This is all I've ever had. That's not a reason to stay. Maybe not. She looked at him curiously. You ever think about settling down somewhere? His expression darkened. Used to, long time ago. What happened? He was quiet for a long moment. Had a wife once. Built a cabin up in the mountains. Planned to raise a family there. She got sick one winter. I couldn't get her down to a doctor in time. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he'd told the story so many times it had lost its edges. She died in that cabin. I buried her there. Haven't been back since. Eliza's chest tightened. Rowan, Don't. He held up a hand. I'm not telling you for sympathy, just answering your question. She nodded, her throat tight. That's why you drift, she said softly. Yeah. You're punishing yourself. He looked at her sharply. What? You're punishing yourself, she repeated, for not saving her. You think if you don't let yourself stay anywhere, don't let yourself care about anyone, you won't lose them again. His jaw clenched. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not. She met his eyes. But I know what it's like to be afraid of losing people. I know what it's like to be so scared of being hurt that you stop trying. That what you're doing? Hiding in this store, letting this town treat you like dirt? The words stung, but she didn't flinch. Maybe. They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with something raw and unspoken. I'm not trying to hurt you, he said finally, his voice rough. I know, but you're right. I am punishing myself. He looked away. I don't know how to stop. Eliza set down the ledger and stepped closer. Maybe you don't have to figure it out all at once. He looked at her, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. You make it sound easy. It's not. But maybe it's not as hard as you think. For a moment she thought he might reach for her, but he didn't. He just nodded slowly, his expression softening. You're stronger than you think, Eliza. So are you. The town's whispers grew louder. People saw them together, saw Rowan working on her house, saw them walking side by side. And the more they saw, the more vicious the talk became. She's fooling herself if she thinks he'll stay. Men like that don't settle down with girls like her. She's going to get her heart broken, mark my words. Eliza heard it all, and every time it chipped away at the fragile hope she'd started to build. One evening, after Rowan had left, she sat alone in her house and let herself cry. Not because she believed the things they said, but because part of her was terrified they were right. What if he did leave? What if this, whatever this was, wasn't real? She didn't know how to trust it, didn't know how to trust him, and more than that, she didn't know how to trust herself. But the next morning, when she opened the store, Rowan was already there, waiting on the step. Morning, he said, like always, and despite everything, she smiled. Morning. Winter crept closer. The days grew shorter, the nights colder. Rowan started staying later, reluctant to leave her alone in the dark. He built up her firewood supply, checked the seals on her windows, made sure her roof wouldn't leak when the snow came. You're doing too much, she said one evening, watching him stack logs in her shed. I'm doing what needs doing. Why? He stopped, turning to look at her. Because I don't want you to freeze to death. That a good enough reason? Rowan? Because I care, Eliza. His voice was rough, almost angry. Because somewhere along the way I started caring, and I don't know how to stop. So let me do this. Let me help you. She stared at him, her heart pounding. I care too, she whispered. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. But instead he just stood there, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, his hand hovering near her face like he didn't quite dare touch her. You deserve better than this town, he said quietly. Maybe. She looked up at him. But I don't want to leave, not yet. Why not? Because you're here. His breath hitched, and this time he did reach for her, his hand cupping her cheek gently, like she was something precious. Eliza? The sound of hooves and shouting shattered the moment. They both turned toward the street, where riders were thundering into town, their faces hard, their guns visible. Rowan's expression went cold. Get inside. What? Now? But it was already too late. The outlaws had arrived. The riders came in hard, 8 of them, kicking up dust and noise like a storm rolling through. Eliza felt Rowan's hand on her arm, firm but not rough, pulling her back toward the house. Her feet moved automatically, but her eyes stayed locked on the men dismounting in the middle of the street. They weren't drifters. They weren't cowboys looking for work or traders passing through. These men had the look of something meaner, leather vests worn dark with sweat and grime, gun belts slung low, faces that hadn't seen kindness in a long time. Inside, Rowan said again, his voice harder now. This time she didn't argue. She stepped through the door, but she didn't close it. She couldn't. She watched as Rowan moved toward the street, his posture shifting into something she hadn't seen before, coiled, ready, dangerous. The leader of the group was a tall man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, his hat tilted back like he owned the world. He looked around Dead Willow with the kind of casual contempt that made Eliza's skin crawl. Evening, folks, he called out, his voice carrying across the quiet town. Name's Cade Brennan. My boys and I are just passing through. Won't be any trouble, long as nobody makes it trouble. People had started coming out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. Sheriff Hewitt, a graying man with a limp and a perpetually tired expression, walked slowly toward the group, his hand resting on his holster but not drawing. We don't want trouble here, Brennan, Hewitt said. You and your men can get supplies and move on. That's it. Cade smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's real hospitable of you, Sheriff. Real hospitable. One of the men, younger than the others, with a wild look in his eyes, laughed and spat into the dirt. This town got a saloon? It does, Hewitt said carefully, but it closes at sundown. Then I guess we got here just in time. Rowan had stopped at the edge of Eliza's property, his eyes tracking every movement. Eliza could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand hovered near his belt. He wasn't armed, at least not that she could see, but he looked like he knew how to be. Cade's gaze swept across the street and landed on Rowan. His smile widened. You got something to say, friend? Rowan didn't move. Nope. Good. Cade turned back to the sheriff. We'll be out of your hair by morning. You got my word. Hewitt nodded stiffly, and the gang moved toward the saloon, their boots heavy on the wooden planks. The townspeople watched them go, then slowly retreated back into their homes, doors closing, shutters latching. Rowan turned and walked back to Eliza, his expression grim. You know them? She asked quietly. I know the type. He glanced back toward the saloon. They won't leave in the morning. How do you know? Because men like that don't keep their word. He looked at her, his eyes shadowed. You got a gun in the house? She blinked. My father's rifle. I haven't used it in years. Get it. Load it. Keep it close. Rowan, you're scaring me. Good. Be scared. It'll keep you sharp. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm staying tonight. Not asking, just telling you. I'll sleep on the floor, keep watch. You lock the doors and don't open them for anyone but me or the sheriff. Understood? She nodded, her throat tight. Good girl. He didn't leave her side for the rest of the night. He sat in the small front room, his back against the wall, eyes on the window. Eliza tried to sleep, but every creak of the house, every gust of wind made her jolt awake. Finally, she gave up and came out to sit with him. You should rest, he said without looking at her. So should you. I'm fine. She sat down across from him, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. You've done this before, haven't you? Watched for trouble. Once or twice. Tell me. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze still fixed on the window. Then he sighed. After my wife died, I didn't stay up in the mountains. I drifted south, worked odd jobs, tried to outrun what I was feeling. Ended up in a mining camp in Colorado. Place was rough, lawless. Gang came through one night, tried to shake down the miners for their gold. I helped fight them off. You killed people? Some. His voice was flat. Men who needed killing. Eliza studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the way his eyes never stopped moving. You ever regret it? No, but I regret what it did to me. He finally looked at her. Violence changes you, Eliza, even when it's necessary, even when you're protecting something. It takes something from you, and you don't get it back. Is that why you stayed away from people? Why you kept moving? Part of it. He rubbed a hand over his face. I didn't want to care about anyone again. Didn't want to have something to lose. But you're here. Yeah. He met her eyes. I'm here. She wanted to say something, wanted to tell him that she was glad he was here, that she didn't know what she'd do without him. But the words stuck in her throat, tangled up with fear and doubt, and all the things she'd spent years believing about herself. Instead, she just reached out and touched his hand. He looked down at her fingers resting on his, then turned his hand over and held hers gently. They sat like that for a long time, the silence between them full of everything they couldn't say. Morning came cold and gray. Rowan stood, stretched, and checked the street. It was quiet, too quiet. The saloon doors were still closed, no sign of the gang. Maybe they left, Eliza said hopefully. Rowan shook his head. Their horses are still tied up out front. Maybe they're just sleeping it off. Maybe. But there was no conviction in his voice. Eliza made coffee, and they sat at her small kitchen table, the silence heavy between them. She wanted to ask him what he thought was going to happen, wanted him to tell her everything would be fine, but she knew he wouldn't lie to her. I need to go into town, she said finally. Check on the store. Not alone. Rowan, not alone, Eliza. His tone left no room for argument. They walked together through the quiet streets. A few people were out, going about their business with their heads down, avoiding eye contact. The tension was palpable, like the whole town was holding its breath. When they reached the store, Eliza unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. She moved behind the counter, trying to find comfort in the familiar routine. Rowan stood by the window, watching the street. You think they'll cause trouble today? She asked. I think they already are, just by being here. An hour passed, then 2. A few customers came in, hurried and nervous, buying only what they needed and leaving quickly. No one spoke more than necessary. Then the saloon doors opened and the gang emerged, bleary-eyed and rough-looking. Cade stretched, looked around, and said something that made the others laugh. Rowan's jaw tightened. What are they doing? Eliza asked. Testing, seeing how far they can push before someone pushes back. The gang split up, some heading toward the general store, others wandering down the street. Eliza's heart started to pound. The door opened and 3 of them walked in. Cade wasn't with them, just the younger one who'd laughed the night before and 2 others, both hard-faced and mean-looking. Morning, the young one said, grinning. Nice little place you got here. Eliza forced herself to stay calm. What can I get for you? Oh, we're just looking. He picked up a jar of preserves, tossed it from hand to hand. You run this place all by yourself? I do. That's real impressive. Real impressive. He set the jar down, his eyes flicking to Rowan. Who's your friend? Just a customer, Rowan said evenly. That right? The young man stepped closer. You don't look like a customer. You look like somebody who thinks he's tough. Rowan didn't move, didn't react. I'm just here to buy supplies, same as you. The tension in the room ratcheted up. The other 2 men spread out slightly, flanking Rowan. Eliza's hand moved instinctively toward the counter, where her father's old pistol was hidden in a drawer. Leave him alone, she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The young man laughed. You got a mouth on you. I like that. You got what you came for? Rowan asked quietly. Then take it and go. For a moment, it looked like the young man might do something stupid. His hand drifted toward his gun, his grin turning into something sharper. But then one of the others grabbed his arm. Cade said no trouble, the man muttered. Come on! The young one shrugged him off, but he stepped back. All right, we're going. He looked at Eliza, his grin back in place. See you around, sweetheart. They left, the door banging shut behind them. Eliza let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. Rowan turned to her. You did good. I don't feel good. I feel terrified. That's smart. Fear keeps you alive. He moved to the window, watching the gang regroup in the street. But we've got a problem. What? They're not leaving, and they're testing boundaries. Next time, they won't stop at words. What do we do? I don't know yet. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something like uncertainty in his eyes. But I'm not letting them touch you. That's the one thing I know for sure. The day dragged on. The gang stayed in town, drinking, loitering, making their presence felt. Sheriff Hewitt tried to talk to them, tried to reason with Cade, but it went nowhere. Cade just smiled and promised they'd be gone soon. No one believed him. By evening, the town was on edge. People stayed inside. Shops closed early. The streets were empty except for the gang, who seemed to enjoy the fear they were causing. Eliza closed the store and locked up. Rowan walked her home again, his hand resting on the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and intimate. They're going to do something, she said quietly. Aren't they? Yeah. What? Don't know, but it'll be soon. Inside her house, Rowan checked the windows again, made sure the doors were bolted. He set his coat aside, and for the first time Eliza saw the gun he'd been carrying, tucked into his belt at the small of his back. You've been armed this whole time, she said. Yeah. Why didn't you draw on them earlier, in the store? Because that would have started a fight I wasn't sure we could win. Not there, not then. He looked at her seriously. I'm trying to keep you safe, Eliza. That means picking the right battles. She nodded, understanding but hating it all the same. They ate a simple dinner in silence, the weight of the day pressing down on them. Afterward, Eliza sat by the fire while Rowan took up his post by the window again. You can't stay awake forever, she said. I'll manage. Rowan, I'm not arguing about this. She stood and walked over to him, her heart pounding. Then let me help. We'll take turns. You sleep first, I'll watch. Then we'll switch. He looked at her for a long moment, something conflicted in his expression. Finally, he nodded. All right. But you wake me if you hear anything at all. I will. He laid down on the floor near the fireplace, his coat rolled up under his head. Within minutes, his breathing evened out, and she realized how exhausted he must have been. Eliza sat by the window, the rifle across her lap, and kept watch. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that made every sound feel amplified. She strained her ears, listening for footsteps, voices, anything. But there was nothing. Hours passed. Her eyes grew heavy, her head nodding forward. She jerked awake, blinking hard, forcing herself to stay alert. Then she heard it. A faint sound, like boots on gravel. Her heart slammed into her throat. She stood, gripping the rifle, and moved closer to the window. The street was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. But she could make out shapes moving, shadows shifting, men, at least 3 of them making their way toward her house. Rowan, she whispered urgently. He was on his feet in an instant, fully awake, his hand already on his gun. How many? 3, I think. He moved to the window, looked out, and cursed under his breath. It's them. What do we do? Stay quiet. Stay back. If they break in, you run out the back and head for the sheriff's office. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understood? I'm not leaving you. Eliza. His voice was sharp. If it comes to that, you run. Promise me. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she wasn't some helpless thing that needed to be saved. But the look in his eyes stopped her. I promise. The men reached her fence. One of them laughed, low and mean. Eliza recognized the voice, the young one from the store. You think she's awake? He said. Don't matter, another replied. Cade said teach her a lesson. Teach the whole town a lesson. What about the man? If he gets in the way, we deal with him. Rowan's jaw clenched. He moved away from the window, positioning himself behind the door. When they come through, he said quietly, I'm going to handle it. You stay in the back room. Do not come out. Rowan, do not come out. She nodded, her throat tight with fear. She backed toward the hallway, the rifle still clutched in her hands. The footsteps grew louder. Someone tried the door handle, rattling it. Locked, one of them said. Break it. There was a pause, then a crash as something heavy slammed into the door. The wood splintered, but held. Another crash. The door buckled. Eliza's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst. She pressed herself against the wall in the back room, her finger on the trigger of the rifle. One more hit, and the door exploded inward. 3 men poured into the house, and Rowan moved. He was on the first one before the man even saw him, slamming him into the wall with brutal efficiency. The second man drew his gun, but Rowan kicked it out of his hand and drove an elbow into his face. Blood sprayed. The young one, the one from the store, hesitated, his eyes wide. Then he reached for his gun. Rowan was faster. He drew and fired in one smooth motion, and the young man went down, clutching his shoulder and screaming. The other 2 scrambled back, one of them yelling, He shot Danny! He shot him! Rowan leveled his gun at them. Get out! Now! They didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed their wounded companion and dragged him out, disappearing into the night. Rowan stood in the doorway, breathing hard, his gun still raised. Blood dripped from his knuckles. Eliza, he called. She stumbled out of the back room, her legs shaking. Are you hurt? No. He lowered the gun, his expression hard. But we've got a bigger problem now. What? I just shot one of them. That means this doesn't end here. Cade's going to come for us. For me. She stared at him, the reality of it sinking in. Then we go to the sheriff. We tell him what happened. We will, but it won't matter. Cade doesn't care about the law. Then what do we do? He looked at her, and she saw the weight of the decision in his eyes. I leave. Draw them away from you, from this town. No. The word came out sharp, certain. No, you're not leaving. Eliza, you're not leaving me, Rowan. I won't let you. He stepped closer, his expression torn. If I stay, they'll come after you to get to me. I won't let that happen. Then we fight, together. He shook his head. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. She met his eyes, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. I've spent my whole life being afraid. Afraid of what people think. Afraid of being hurt. Afraid of being alone, but I'm not afraid anymore. Not of this. Not if it means standing with you. For a moment, he just looked at her, something raw and vulnerable in his gaze. Then he reached out and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. You're going to get yourself killed, he murmured against her hair. Then we'll die together. He pulled back, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes searching hers. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, but you've got me anyway. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they'd been holding back. Eliza kissed him back just as hard, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart pounding. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. We need to go to the sheriff, Rowan said. Now. They made their way through the dark streets, moving quickly and quietly. The sheriff's office was a small building near the center of town, a lamp burning in the window. Hewitt looked up when they burst in, his eyes widening at the sight of Rowan's bloodied knuckles and the shattered door they described. They tried to break into your house? Hewitt asked Eliza. Yes. Rowan stopped them. Hewitt looked at Rowan. You shoot one of them? In the shoulder. He'll live. The sheriff cursed. That's going to bring hell down on us. It was already coming, Rowan said. This just moved up the timeline. Hewitt paced, his limp more pronounced than usual. I've got 2 deputies. 2. Against 8 armed men. We can't win a straight fight. Then we don't fight straight, Rowan said. We set a trap. Hewitt stopped pacing. What kind of trap? They want me. I'll give them a reason to chase me. Lead them out of town, into the canyon north of here. You get your deputies, some of the townsmen who can shoot, and set up an ambush. We catch them in a crossfire. End this. That's insane, Hewitt said. You got a better idea? The sheriff didn't answer. I'll do it, Eliza said suddenly. Both men turned to look at her. No, Rowan said immediately. They want to hurt this town. They want to scare us. If I stand with you, it sends a message that we're not backing down. Eliza, this isn't some symbolic gesture. People are going to die. I know. She looked at Hewitt, but if we don't stand up to them, they'll never leave. They'll bleed this town dry. You know I'm right. Hewitt studied her, then nodded slowly. She's got a point. No, Rowan said again, his voice hard. I won't risk her. It's not your choice, Eliza said quietly. He stared at her, anger and fear warring in his expression. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe, but I'd rather die fighting than live afraid. The room was silent. Finally, Rowan exhaled, a long, defeated sound. Fine, but you stay behind me. Always. You don't take risks. You don't play hero. Clear? Clear. Hewitt nodded. All right, we've got until morning to get ready. Let's make it count. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Hewitt gathered his deputies and a handful of men from town, a blacksmith, a stable hand, a shopkeeper. Not many, but enough. Rowan laid out the plan. He'd provoke Cade, make it personal, draw the gang out of town. Once they were in the canyon, Hewitt and his men would spring the ambush. Simple, direct, and incredibly dangerous. What if they don't take the bait? One of the deputies asked. They will, Rowan said. Men like Cade, they can't stand being challenged. I shot one of his boys. He'll come after me. And if they bring the whole gang? That's what we're counting on. Eliza listened, her stomach twisting. This was real. This was happening, and there was no guarantee any of them would survive. As dawn approached, Rowan pulled her aside. Last chance to back out, he said. I'm not backing out. Eliza, I'm not. He sighed, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small revolver. You know how to use this? Point and shoot, right? More or less. He handed it to her. Keep it close. And if things go bad, really bad, you use it. Don't hesitate. She took the gun, the weight of it foreign and heavy in her hand. I won't. He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense. I'm getting you through this. I don't care what it takes. You're making it out alive. You too, she whispered. We'll see. And then the sun rose, and there was no more time for words. The morning light came pale and cold, turning Dead Willow's dusty streets the color of ash. Rowan stood in the middle of the main road, waiting. He'd sent Eliza to the sheriff's office with strict orders to stay put until he came for her, but he knew she wouldn't listen. She never did, not anymore. The town was eerily quiet. Doors and shutters were closed tight, like the whole place was holding its breath. Even the wind had died down, leaving everything still and tense. Rowan flexed his fingers, feeling the dried blood crack on his knuckles. His gun sat heavy on his hip. He'd checked it twice already, counted the rounds, made sure the action was smooth. Old habits from a life he'd tried to leave behind. The saloon doors opened. Cade Brennan stepped out first, his scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile, if it had any warmth in it. Behind him came the rest of the gang, 7 men now, since Danny was laid up with a bullet in his shoulder. They spread out across the street, forming a loose line. You got a lot of nerve standing out here like this, Cade called, after what you did to my boy. Your boy tried to break into a woman's home in the middle of the night, Rowan said evenly. He's lucky I only shot him once. Cade's smile vanished. That woman's nothing. Nobody. You threw your life away for nothing. She's worth more than all of you combined. One of the men laughed, a harsh sound. You hear that, Cade? He's in love. That's real sweet, Cade said. Real sweet. But it doesn't change what's about to happen here. Rowan's hand drifted closer to his gun. You planning to do this in the middle of town, in front of witnesses? What witnesses? Cade gestured around. I don't see anybody. Do you boys? They all shook their heads, grinning. Town's too scared to even look out their windows, Cade continued. That's what happens when people know their place. When they know better than to cross me. Is that what you think this is about? Putting people in their place? That's exactly what it's about. Cade took a step forward. You disrupted the order of things, stuck your nose where it didn't belong, and now I'm going to remind everyone what happens when you do that. Rowan didn't move. You're not as smart as you think you are, Cade. What's that supposed to mean? Means you're so busy trying to look tough, you can't see the trap closing around you. Cade's eyes narrowed. What trap? This one. The gunshot came from the roof of the general store, not aimed at anyone, just a warning shot that cracked through the morning air like thunder. The gang spun, hands going to their weapons, and that's when Hewitt and his men stepped out from cover, behind water troughs, around corners, from doorways. Not many, maybe 10 in total, but all armed and all aiming at the gang. "Drop your weapons," Hewitt called out. "You're surrounded." Cade's face went dark with rage. "You son of a—" "I said drop them." For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension stretched so tight Rowan thought it might snap and take all of them with it. Then one of the gang members, a thick-necked man with a face like a bulldog, made a move for his gun. Everything exploded at once. Rowan drew and fired in the same motion, hitting Bulldog in the chest. The man went down hard. Return fire erupted from the gang, bullets tearing through wood and glass. One of Hewitt's deputies went down clutching his leg, screaming. Rowan dove behind a water trough, the wood splintering above his head. He came up shooting, dropping another gang member who'd been trying to flank the sheriff. The air filled with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. "Fall back," Hewitt yelled. Fall back to the—" His words were cut off as a bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground and didn't get up. Rowan cursed. This wasn't going according to plan. They were supposed to drive the gang out of town, not get into a pitched battle in the middle of the street. He fired twice more, providing cover as Hewitt's men tried to regroup. But the gang had spread out, using the buildings for cover, and now they had the advantage. Numbers and position. Cade's voice rang out above the chaos. "Burn them out! Torch the buildings!" Rowan's blood went cold. If they started fires, the whole town would go up. Dead Willow was all wood and dry timber. It had burned like kindling. He had to end this. Now. He broke from cover, running low and fast toward the alley between the saloon and the mercantile. Bullets kicked up dirt at his heels, but he made it, pressing himself against the wall and breathing hard. A shadow moved in the alley mouth. Rowan raised his gun, but then he saw who it was. Eliza. She had the rifle, her face pale but determined. "Don't even start," she said before he could speak. "I heard the shooting. I'm not hiding while people die." "You're supposed to be. I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm here now, so tell me where you need me." There wasn't time to argue. Rowan pointed toward the back of the saloon. "There's a rear entrance. If we can get inside, we can take the high ground, force them into the open." "Then let's go." They moved together through the alley, staying low. Behind them, the gunfire continued, sporadic now but still deadly. Someone was screaming. The smell of smoke started to drift through the air. They reached the back door of the saloon. Rowan tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back and kicked it hard. Once, twice. The third time the door burst open and they rushed inside. The saloon was dim and reeked of stale beer and tobacco. Rowan moved quickly to the stairs, Eliza right behind him. They climbed to the second floor, where a narrow hallway ran the length of the building with rooms on either side. Rowan went to the front window and looked out. From here, he could see the whole street. 3 of Hewitt's men were pinned down behind an overturned wagon. The gang had them flanked on both sides. "Can you shoot?" he asked Eliza. "I can try." "That'll have to do." He pointed to a window on the opposite side. "You take that one. Aim for anyone trying to circle around our people. Don't think, just shoot." She nodded and moved into position. Rowan broke the glass with the butt of his gun and took aim. He fired 3 times in quick succession, hitting one gang member and forcing another into cover. Across the hallway, Eliza's rifle cracked, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. "Did I hit him?" she called. "Close enough. Keep shooting." They kept up the fire, creating a crossfire that gave Hewitt's men a chance to regroup. One by one, the townsmen managed to fall back to better positions, dragging the wounded with them. But the gang was adapting. Cade had pulled his men back, and now they were concentrating their fire on the saloon. Bullets punched through the walls, sending splinters flying. "We need to move," Rowan said. "They figured out where we are." But before they could retreat, Eliza gasped. "Rowan, look!" He followed her gaze. Down in the street, 2 gang members were carrying torches, moving toward the buildings on the south side of town. One of them threw his torch through the window of a dry goods store. Flames immediately caught, spreading fast. "No," Eliza breathed. "No, no, no." Rowan's mind raced. If those fires spread, everything they were fighting for would be ash. The town, the people, all of it. He had to change the game. "Stay here," he told Eliza. "Keep shooting. Don't let them advance." "Where are you going?" "To end this." Before she could argue, he was gone, running down the stairs and out the back door. The smoke was thicker now, stinging his eyes. He could hear the crackle of flames, feel the heat building. He circled around the back of the buildings, moving fast. His plan was insane, probably suicidal, but it was the only one he had. He emerged behind the gang's position near where their horses were tied. The animals were nervous, stamping and pulling at their reins. Rowan cut them loose with his knife, then fired his gun in the air. The horses bolted, scattering in all directions. "What the hell?" someone shouted. Rowan stepped into the open. "Cade!" The gang leader turned, his face twisting with fury when he saw Rowan standing there alone. "You want me?" Rowan called. "Here I am, just you and me. Let's settle this." Cade laughed, a mean, ugly sound. "You think I'm stupid? The second I step out there, your people will cut me down." "No, they won't, because I'm offering you a trade." "What kind of trade?" Rowan took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would change everything. "Me for the town. I'll go with you. No fight, no tricks. You let these people be, and I'm yours." Silence fell across the street. Even the gunfire had stopped. Cade studied him, suspicious. "Why would you do that?" "Because this is my fault. I started this when I shot your man, and I'm ending it." "Rowan, no!" Eliza's voice rang out from the saloon window. "Don't you dare!" He didn't look at her. If he did, he'd lose his nerve. Cade grinned. Well, the hero wants to sacrifice himself. That's real noble." He glanced back at his men. "What do you boys think? Should we take him up on it?" "Don't trust him, Cade," one of them said. "It's a trick." "Maybe, maybe not." Cade turned back to Rowan. "All right, I'll take your deal, but we do it my way. You come with us now, right now, and if anyone tries to follow, if anyone takes a shot, the deal's off, and we burn this whole town to the ground. Understood?" Rowan nodded. "Understood." He started walking toward Cade, his hands raised, his gun still holstered. Every step felt like walking to his own execution, but he kept moving. Eliza appeared in the street, the rifle raised. "Stop! Rowan, stop!" "Get back inside," he said without looking at her. "I won't let you do this. You don't have a choice. Rowan, Eliza." He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke her. "Please, let me do this. Let me save you." Tears streamed down her face. "You can't! I won't!" But Cade's men had already moved in, grabbing Rowan and binding his hands behind his back. One of them shoved him forward roughly. "Smart choice, hero," Cade said. "Now let's get out of this miserable town." They started moving toward the edge of town, dragging Rowan with them. Eliza stood frozen in the street, the rifle hanging useless in her hands. Hewitt limped up beside her, one hand pressed to his wounded shoulder. "We have to go after them." "How?" she asked, her voice hollow. "They'll kill him if we follow." "They're going to kill him anyway." Hewitt looked at her seriously. "You know that, right? The second they're far enough away, they'll put a bullet in his head." "Then what do we do?" Hewitt wiped blood from his mouth. "We track them, quietly, and we hit them when they're not expecting it." Eliza's grief hardened into something else, something cold and sharp. "Get your men, all of them. Anyone who can ride and shoot. We lost good people today. Some won't want to risk more. Then they can stay behind, but I'm going after him." She met Hewitt's eyes. "With or without you?" The sheriff nodded slowly. "All right, let's go get him back." They gathered what was left of their force, 6 men, including Hewitt, all injured to some degree, but all willing to fight. They armed themselves, took horses from the stable, and set out following the gang's trail. It wasn't hard to track. Cade wasn't trying to hide his path. He was heading north toward the canyon country, probably planning to hole up in one of the abandoned mining camps up there. Eliza rode in grim silence, her mind turning over everything that had happened. She kept seeing Rowan's face, the way he'd looked at her before they took him, like he was saying goodbye. She wouldn't accept that. Couldn't. "How far ahead are they?" she asked Hewitt. "Maybe an hour. They're moving slow, probably think they're safe now." "Good. That gives us time to catch up." One of the men, the blacksmith named Pike, rode up alongside her. "Miss Harper, you sure about this? We're riding into rough country with half a dozen men against 7 armed outlaws. Those aren't good odds." "I don't care about the odds. But if you want to turn back, do it now. I'm not stopping." Pike looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and fell back into line. They rode hard for the next hour, pushing the horses as fast as they dared on the rough terrain. The land grew more rugged, the trail climbing into rocky hills cut through with narrow canyons. Hewitt called a halt near the mouth of one of the canyons. "This is where they're headed. Dead Man's Canyon. There's an old mining camp about a mile in, good defensive position. If they're smart, that's where they'll make their stand." "How do we approach without being seen?" Eliza asked. "There's a ridge that runs along the north side. We can get above them, use the high ground." "Then that's what we do." They dismounted and tied the horses, then began the climb on foot. It was steep and treacherous, loose rock sliding under their boots. Eliza's legs burned, her breath coming hard, but she didn't slow down. When they reached the ridge, they could see down into the canyon. Just as Hewitt had predicted, the gang had stopped at the old mining camp. They'd tied Rowan to a post in the center of what used to be the main yard, his head hanging forward. Eliza's heart clenched. Was he already dead? Then he moved, shifting his weight, and relief flooded through her. "He's alive," she whispered. "For now," Hewitt said grimly. "But we need to move fast. Cade's probably just waiting until dark to kill him." "What's the plan?" Hewitt studied the layout. "We spread out along the ridge, get into position. When I give the signal, we open fire from above, catch them in a crossfire, force them to scatter. In the confusion, someone gets down there and cuts Rowan loose." "I'll do it," Eliza said immediately. "Miss Harper." "I'll do it," she repeated. "He came for me. Now I'm coming for him." Hewitt looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "All right, but you wait for my signal, and you move fast. Understood?" "Understood." They spread out along the ridge, each man taking a position with a clear line of sight. Eliza stayed close to the steepest part of the slope, the quickest route down. Below, Cade was talking to his men, gesturing animatedly. Eliza couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language was clear. He was angry, working himself up to something. Then he walked over to Rowan and backhanded him across the face. Rowan's head snapped to the side, but he didn't cry out. Cade hit him again, harder, and this time Rowan spat blood. Eliza's finger tightened on the trigger of her rifle. Every instinct screamed at her to shoot, to put a bullet in Cade right now. But she forced herself to wait. One shot too soon would ruin everything. Cade was talking now, his voice carrying up to the ridge. "You think you're some kind of hero? You think giving yourself up saved anyone?" Rowan lifted his head, his face bloody, but his eyes clear. "I think you're a coward who preys on people weaker than you. And I think when this is over, you're going to die scared and alone." Cade's face went red. He pulled his gun and pressed it to Rowan's temple. "Any last words, hero?" Rowan smiled, blood on his teeth. "Yeah, duck." Cade frowned. "What?" Hewitt's rifle cracked from the ridge. The bullet took one of the gang members in the chest, dropping him instantly. Then all 6 rifles opened up at once, the sound echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. The gang scattered, diving for cover, returning fire wildly. Bullets pinged off rocks, sending chips flying. Eliza didn't wait. She started down the slope, half running, half sliding, the rifle slung across her back. Rocks skidded under her boots, and once she nearly fell, but she kept moving. Above her, the firefight continued, the noise deafening. She reached the bottom and ran across the open ground toward Rowan. He saw her coming, his eyes going wide. "Get back," he shouted. "Get back, you crazy—" A bullet cracked past her head, so close she felt the wind of it. She didn't stop. She reached Rowan and pulled out the knife Hewitt had given her, sawing frantically at the ropes binding his wrists. "What are you doing?" Rowan demanded. "Saving you, you idiot!" The ropes came free. Rowan grabbed her and pulled her down as more bullets tore through the air where they'd been standing. "We need to move," he said. "Now!" They ran for the nearest cover. An old ore cart turned on its side. Bullets hammered into the metal, the sound deafening. "Your people are on the ridge?" Rowan asked, breathing hard. "Yeah." "How many?" 6, including Hewitt. "That's not enough." "It's what we have." One of the gang members broke from cover, trying to flank their position. Rowan snatched up a fallen rifle and shot him. The man went down screaming. We can't stay here, Rowan said. They'll surround us. Then we go up, back to the ridge. You're insane. You got a better idea? He didn't. They broke from cover and ran for the slope, bullets chasing them. Eliza's lungs burned, her legs feeling like they might give out, but she kept climbing. A gang member appeared above them on the ridge, his gun raised. Before he could fire, Pike stepped out from behind a boulder and shot him. The man tumbled down the slope, rolling past them. They reached the top, collapsing behind cover. Hewitt crawled over, his face gray with pain. We got 2 of them, he said, but we're running out of ammunition. How many are left? Rowan asked. 5, including Cade. Where's Cade? As if in answer, Cade's voice boomed out from below. You're trapped up there, you hear me? Trapped. And when we come up there, we're going to kill every last one of you. Rowan looked at Eliza, then at Hewitt. We need to force them to charge. Get them in the open where we have the advantage. How? Hewitt asked. Rowan was quiet for a moment, his mind working. Then his expression hardened. I'm going to give them a target they can't resist. Rowan, no, Eliza started. Listen to me. He grabbed her shoulders. I'm going to draw them out. When they come after me, you and the others pick them off. It's our only chance. You'll die. Maybe. But if we stay here, we all die. He looked at Hewitt. Can you do it? Can you make those shots? Hewitt nodded grimly. We'll make them. Rowan turned back to Eliza. He pulled her close and kissed her hard. If I don't make it, don't say that. If I don't make it, you keep living. You hear me? You get out of this canyon, you go back to Dead Willow, and you live. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I can't. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I've ever met. He brushed the tears away with his thumb. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her again, then let her go and stood up. Cade, he shouted, you want me? Come and get me. And then he started running down the slope straight toward the gang, firing as he went. Eliza watched Rowan descend the slope in a controlled slide, rocks scattering beneath his boots, the rifle barking in his hands. Every shot was calculated, deliberate, designed to draw fire. And it worked. The gang members broke from cover, their attention locked on the man charging straight at them like he had nothing left to lose. Now! Hewitt shouted. The rifles on the ridge opened up in a coordinated volley. The first shot dropped a gang member who'd stepped out to aim at Rowan. The second caught another in the leg, sending him sprawling. Eliza sighted down her own rifle, her hand steadier than she'd expected, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, but she saw the man she'd aimed at clutch his side and fall. 3 down, 2 left, plus Cade. Rowan had reached the bottom now, ducking behind the same ore cart they'd used for cover moments before. Bullets hammered the metal, the noise like a dozen hammers on an anvil. He's pinned, Pike said from beside Eliza. We need to give him an opening. Keep shooting, Hewitt ordered. Don't let them advance. But Cade was smarter than his men. While the others focused on Rowan, he'd circled around, using the buildings for cover. Eliza caught the movement out of the corner of her eye and swung her rifle toward him. There, she shouted. Cade fired first. The bullet struck the rock inches from Eliza's head, spraying her face with stone chips. She flinched back, and by the time she looked again, Cade had disappeared into one of the old mining shacks. He's flanking us, one of the men said, his voice tight with fear. Hewitt swore. If he gets behind us, we're finished. Eliza's mind raced. Down in the mining camp, Rowan was still trapped behind the ore cart, trading shots with the remaining gang members. Up here, Cade was working his way around to their weak side. They were being squeezed from both directions. I'm going after him, she said. What? Hewitt stared at her. That's suicide. So is staying here waiting for him to shoot us in the back. She checked her rifle, 4 rounds left, and started moving along the ridge toward where Cade had disappeared. Miss Harper, keep Rowan alive, she called back. I'll handle Cade. She didn't give him time to argue. She moved quickly, staying low, using the rocks for cover. The old mining shacks were scattered along this part of the ridge, their walls rotted and full of holes. Cade could be in any of them. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her flinch. She'd never hunted a man before, never stalked another human being with the intent to kill. The weight of it pressed down on her, making her hands shake. But then she thought of Rowan, bleeding and bound, taking those hits from Cade without making a sound. She thought of how he'd given himself up to save the town, to save her. And the shaking stopped. She reached the first shack and pressed herself against the wall beside the door. The wood was so old she could see through the gaps. Empty. She moved to the next one. Behind her, gunfire continued from both the ridge and the camp below. She tried to block it out, focus on the immediate threat. The third shack was different. The door hung open slightly and she could see fresh boot prints in the dust leading inside. She raised her rifle, every nerve screaming. "I know you're out there, girl," Cade's voice came from inside, almost conversational. "Saw you coming from a mile away." Eliza didn't respond. She circled around to the side of the shack where a window gaped open, the glass long since broken out. "You got guts, I'll give you that," Cade continued. "Most women would be hiding, crying, waiting for the men to sort things out. But not you. You came after me yourself." She peered through the window. The interior was dim, cluttered with old equipment and debris. She couldn't see Cade, but she could hear him moving, his boots scraping on the wooden floor. "You love him, don't you? That mountain man. I could see it in your eyes back in town, the way you looked at him." Cade laughed. "That's why you're here. You think you're going to save him." Eliza spotted movement near the back of the shack. She aimed but held her fire. One shot. She had to make it count. "Here's what's going to happen," Cade said. "You're going to put down that rifle and step inside. You do that, and maybe I let your man live. Maybe I just take what I want from you and ride out of here." Eliza's stomach turned, but her voice came out cold and steady. "You're not taking anything from me." "No?" Cade stepped into view near the doorway, his gun raised. "Then I guess your man dies, along with everyone else up on that ridge." She could see him clearly now through the window. He was looking toward the door, expecting her to come through that way. His back was partially to her. She took a breath, aimed at center mass, and fired. The rifle kicked hard. Through the smoke and noise, she saw Cade jerk sideways, his gun going off wild. He crashed into a stack of old timber, cursing. Eliza didn't wait to see if the shot was fatal. She dropped the rifle and pulled the revolver Rowan had given her, then ran around to the front of the shack. She kicked the door fully open and stepped inside, the gun raised. Cade was on the ground, clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. His gun lay a few feet away, too far for him to reach. He looked up at her, his face twisted with pain and rage. "You shot me," he gasped. "You actually shot me." "Yeah." Eliza kept the revolver trained on him, her hands rock steady now. "I did." "You got lucky. One lucky shot." "Maybe. But you're still the one bleeding on the floor." Cade tried to push himself up, grimaced, and fell back. "You won't kill me. You're not a killer. I can see it in you." "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're scared. I know you're in over your head. I know, Shut up." Eliza moved closer, the gun never wavering. "You're right about one thing. I'm not a killer. I don't want to be. But you hurt people I care about. You terrorized an entire town. And if you think I won't pull this trigger to protect them, you're wrong." Cade stared at her, and for the first time she saw something like fear in his eyes. "Your men are dead or dying," she continued. "It's over. You lost." "Then what are you waiting for?" Cade spat. "Go ahead. Do it." Eliza's finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy. One squeeze, and this man who'd brought so much pain would be gone. But she couldn't. She lowered the gun slightly. "I'm not you." Cade laughed, a wet, pained sound. "That's your mistake." He moved fast for an injured man, his hand darting to his belt and coming up with a knife. He lunged at Eliza, the blade flashing. She pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Cade stopped mid-lunge, the knife falling from his fingers. He looked down at the new wound in his chest, then up at Eliza, surprise written across his face. "Guess I was wrong about you," he said, and then he collapsed. Eliza stood there, the gun still raised, her ears ringing. She'd killed a man. Actually killed him. The reality of it crashed over her in waves. Her hands started shaking again, so badly she nearly dropped the revolver. But there was no time to process it. Outside, the gunfire had intensified. She stumbled out of the shack and back toward the ridge. When she got there, she found Hewitt and the others still firing down into the camp. But now Rowan was moving, no longer pinned down. He'd managed to close the distance to one of the remaining gang members and was grappling with him hand to hand. "Where's Cade?" Hewitt asked without taking his eyes off the fight below. Dead. Hewitt glanced at her, took in her pale face and shaking hands, and nodded. Good. One less problem. Down in the camp, Rowan got the upper hand in his fight, slamming the gang member's head against a rock. The man went limp. That left one. The last gang member realized he was alone. He dropped his gun and raised his hands. I surrender. Don't shoot. Hold fire, Hewitt called. The shooting stopped. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the noise had been. Rowan stood in the center of the camp, breathing hard, covered in blood and dirt. He looked up at the ridge, his eyes searching until they found Eliza. She started down the slope, not caring about the loose rock or the steepness. She half ran, half slid, her only thought getting to him. When she reached the bottom, Rowan met her halfway. They collided hard, his arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. You're alive, he said against her hair. You're alive. So are you. She pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his face. You're an idiot. You know that. Running down here like that, drawing their fire, had to be done. You almost got yourself killed. But I didn't. He smiled, just a little, and wiped blood from the corner of his mouth. Thanks to you. I killed him, she said quietly. Cade. I killed him. Rowan's expression softened. I know. I heard the shot. He had a knife. He was going to... I didn't have a choice. Hey! He pulled her close again. You did what you had to do, to survive, to protect yourself. That's not murder, Eliza. That's staying alive. She nodded against his chest, but the tears came anyway. Not sobs, just a quiet, steady stream. All the fear and adrenaline and horror of the last few hours poured out of her. Rowan held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring things she couldn't quite hear, but understood anyway. Hewitt and the others made their way down from the ridge. The sheriff limped over to the surrendering gang member and secured his hands with a rope. That's the last of them, Hewitt said. We did it. Pike slumped against a wall, exhausted. I can't believe we actually did it. We lost 3 men, one of the others said quietly. Davis, Martinez, and young Cooper. They didn't make it. The victory, such as it was, tasted bitter. Eliza pulled away from Rowan and looked at the faces of the surviving men. They were all injured to some degree, all exhausted, all marked by what they'd been through. We need to get back to town, Hewitt said. Tend the wounded, put out those fires, bury the dead. What about him? Pike nodded toward the captured gang member. We'll take him back, hold him until a marshal can come through. Let the law handle it proper. They gathered what weapons and supplies they could salvage and started the long trek back to Dead Willow. Rowan kept one arm around Eliza's shoulders the whole way, like he was afraid if he let go, she'd disappear. They reached the horses and mounted up. The ride back was quiet, everyone too tired and too shaken to talk much. When Dead Willow finally came into view, Eliza's heart sank. Smoke still rose from several buildings on the south side of town. The dry goods store was gone completely, just a blackened skeleton. The mercantile next to it was half collapsed. But people were out in the streets fighting the fires, helping the wounded. They looked up as the riders approached, their faces a mixture of relief and grief. Mrs. Callahan, the woman who'd said such cruel things about Eliza, stood in the middle of the street with soot on her face and tears on her cheeks. When she saw Eliza, she ran over. You're alive, she said. Thank heavens you're alive. Eliza dismounted slowly, unsure how to respond. Mrs. Callahan grabbed her hands. I'm sorry for everything I said, every cruel word. You saved this town, you and Mr. Vale. You saved all of us. Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. Over the next few hours, the town pulled together in a way Eliza had never seen before. People who'd barely spoken to each other worked side by side to put out the last of the fires, to care for the wounded, to clear debris. Rowan refused to see the doctor until Eliza physically pushed him into the man's office. The doctor, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, examined him with practiced efficiency. Cracked rib, possibly 2, the doctor said. Bruising, lacerations, mild concussion. You're lucky, Mr. Vale. Very lucky. Don't feel lucky, Rowan muttered. Nevertheless, the doctor bandaged his ribs and gave him a bottle of laudanum for the pain. Rest, at least a few days, and try not to get shot or beaten for a while. I'll do my best. Eliza took him back to her house. The front door still hung crooked from when the gang had broken in that first night. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I'll fix that tomorrow," Rowan said, looking at the door. "You'll rest tomorrow." Eliza guided him to her small bedroom. "Doctor's orders." "Since when do you care about doctor's orders?" "Since you nearly died." She helped him sit on the bed, then knelt to pull off his boots. Twice. He watched her work, something unreadable in his expression. When she finished and stood up, he caught her hand. "What you did today," he said quietly. "Going after Cade, shooting him, saving my life. That took courage most people don't have. I was terrified the whole time." "I know, that's what made it courage." He pulled her down to sit beside him. "Eliza, I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. "What?" "When I gave myself up, when I walked toward Cade thinking I was going to die, all I could think about was you. About how I'd wasted so much time being afraid, keeping you at arm's length, trying to protect myself from getting hurt again." He took a breath. "And I realized something. I was already hurt. Because I'd already fallen for you. Somewhere between that first day in the store and now, I fell completely in love with you." Eliza's breath caught. "Rowan." "I know I'm not what you deserve. I'm broken. I've got nothing to offer except a life that'll probably be hard more often than it's easy. But if you'll have me, if you'll take a chance on a man who's still learning how to hope again." She kissed him, cutting off the words. When she pulled back, she was smiling through tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll have you. I love you too, you stubborn, self-sacrificing fool." He laughed, then winced and grabbed his ribs. "Don't make me laugh. It hurts. Then stop saying things that make me want to kiss you." "That's going to be difficult." She kissed him again anyway, gentler this time. When they finally broke apart, Rowan laid back on the bed with a groan. "Stay," he said. "Just for tonight. I don't want to be alone." "I'm not going anywhere." Eliza laid down beside him, careful not to jostle his injuries. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. Outside, the sounds of the town slowly settling back into itself drifted through the window. Voices calling to each other, hammers already starting to rebuild, the normal sounds of life resuming. "What happens now?" Eliza asked quietly. "We rebuild. We heal. We figure out what comes next. Together? If you want." "I do." She lifted her head to look at him. "But I have conditions." He raised an eyebrow. "Conditions?" "We do this right. No more running away when things get hard. No more keeping walls up to protect yourself. If we're going to do this, we do it honestly, completely." "I can do that." He touched her face gently. "What else?" "We leave Dead Willow eventually. Not tomorrow, not next week. But eventually. I want to see what else is out there. I want to build something new, somewhere we can both start fresh." "The mountains? Maybe. Or somewhere else entirely. Somewhere we can just be us, without the weight of the past hanging over everything." Rowan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he nodded. "All right. We'll go wherever you want. Do whatever you want. As long as we're together. That's all I need." They fell silent, exhaustion finally catching up to both of them. Eliza felt herself drifting, the events of the day starting to blur into something dreamlike and distant. "Eliza." Rowan's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Hmm? Thank you for coming after me, for not giving up. You did the same for me." "I know, but still. Thank you." She smiled against his shoulder. "You're welcome." In the days that followed, the town began to heal. The fires were fully extinguished, the damaged buildings were torn down or repaired. The dead were buried in the cemetery on the hill, their graves marked with simple wooden crosses. Rowan recovered slowly, his ribs knitting back together, the bruises fading from purple to yellow to nothing. Eliza tended to him, and in doing so, she found a purpose she'd never had before. Not just running the store, not just surviving, but caring for someone. Being needed. The town's attitude toward her changed too. People who'd once looked right through her now stopped to talk. Mrs. Callahan brought over food. The blacksmith, Pike, helped repair her broken door without being asked. Even the young people who'd once laughed at her now treated her with something like respect. It It was strange at first, disorienting. Eliza had spent so long being invisible that being seen felt almost uncomfortable. "You're a hero now, but," Rowan said one afternoon, watching her navigate a conversation with a group of townswomen in the street. "How does it feel?" "Weird," she admitted. "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like the same person I've always been." "Maybe that's the point. Maybe you always had this in you, and it just took the right circumstances to bring it out. Or the right person." He smiled. "Maybe that too." 2 weeks after the battle, a marshal rode into town. He was a hard-faced man with gray in his beard and a no-nonsense attitude. He took statements from everyone who'd been involved, examined the bodies of the gang members who'd died, and interviewed the one they'd captured. "You did good here," he told Hewitt. "Most towns would have just rolled over, let these bastards have their way. You fought back. That takes guts." "Wasn't just us," Hewitt said, nodding toward Rowan and Eliza. "These two did most of the heavy lifting." The marshal looked at them with interest. "That right?" "We did what needed doing," Rowan said simply. "Well, you did it well." The marshal tipped his hat. "I'll be taking the prisoner back to face trial. Far as I'm concerned, the rest of this is self-defense and justified. You won't be hearing from the law again." After he left, taking the last reminder of the gang with him, Dead Willow seemed to breathe easier. Rowan's strength came back day by day. Soon he was helping with the rebuilding efforts, working alongside the other men to raise new walls, hammer new roofs into place. Eliza watched him sometimes, marveling at how easily he'd integrated into the community. "You're good at this," she said one evening as they walked home together. "Being part of something." "It's been a long time," he admitted. "Forgot what it felt like." "You like it?" "I do. But I also meant what I said. About leaving eventually. This is good, and I'm grateful for it. But it's not forever." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "Neither of us belongs here forever." That night, lying in bed, Rowan told her about the cabin he'd built in the mountains, about the life he'd tried to make there with his wife, and how it had all fallen apart. "I burned it down," he said quietly. "After she died. Couldn't stand to look at it anymore." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. It was beautiful up there. Peaceful. The kind of place where you could hear yourself think. Could we build another one? Somewhere new?" He looked at her in the darkness. "You'd want that? To live in the middle of nowhere, just the two of us?" "I think I'd want that more than anything." She touched his face. "As long as it's with you." "Then we'll do it. When the time's right, we'll find a place. Build something that's ours. Promise?" "Promise." Winter settled over Dead Willow like a blanket. Snow came early and stayed late, turning the streets white and the nights long. The town hunkered down, conserving supplies, keeping close to their fires. Eliza and Rowan grew even closer during those months. They spent their evenings by her fireplace, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories about his travels, the places he'd seen, the people he'd met. She told him about her childhood, about her parents, about the loneliness that had defined so much of her life. "I used to think there was something wrong with me," she admitted one night. "That I was too plain, too quiet, too unremarkable for anyone to love." "There's nothing wrong with you," Rowan said fiercely. "You're the strongest, bravest, most beautiful person I've ever known." "I'm not beautiful." "Yes, you are. Maybe not in the way magazines talk about, but that's not what matters. You're beautiful because you're kind, because you're resilient, because you see the world clearly, but still choose to hope." He pulled her closer. "That's the kind of beauty that lasts." She kissed him for that, long and deep, pouring everything she felt into it. When spring finally came, melting the snow and turning the world green again, Rowan sat Eliza down and asked her to marry him. It wasn't a grand proposal. There was no ring, no prepared speech. They were just sitting on her front step, watching the sunset, and he turned to her and said, "Marry me." She looked at him, surprised. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other that long. But I'm sure, Eliza. I've never been more sure of anything." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony in the center of town. Sheriff Hewitt officiated, and what felt like the entire population of Dead Willow showed up to witness it. Eliza wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but Rowan looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I love you," he said when they exchanged vows, "and I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving it." "I love you too," she replied, "and I will stand beside you through everything, the good and the bad." When they kissed to seal their union, the crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food, music, dancing. Mrs. Callahan cried happy tears. Pike gave them a hand-forged iron pot as a wedding gift. The whole town came together to celebrate this union, this new beginning. Later, when they were finally alone, Rowan carried Eliza across the threshold of her little house. "Our house now," he corrected when she said as much. "Everything that's yours is mine, and everything that's mine is yours." "You don't have anything. I have you. That's everything." She laughed and kissed him. "When do we leave?" "Leave? For the mountains. For our new life." He set her down gently. "You want to go soon?" "As soon as possible. I love these people. I'm grateful for what this town has become, but it's still full of ghosts for me. I want to start fresh, somewhere that's just ours." Rowan nodded slowly. "All right, we'll leave when summer comes. Give me time to scout locations, make sure we've got everything we need." "I can't wait." "Neither can I." And when he kissed her again, Eliza felt something she'd never felt before in her life. She felt home. Summer arrived slowly that year, creeping in with warm winds and longer days that stretched the sky into shades of gold and amber. Eliza spent those weeks preparing for the life she'd chosen, selling what she couldn't carry, giving away what she didn't need. The store went to Pike's eldest son, a quiet young man who'd always been kind to her. She sold it for less than it was worth, but she didn't care. Money wasn't what mattered anymore. Rowan spent his days ranging north into the high country, scouting locations, mapping routes, coming back each time with stories about what he'd found. A valley near a cold stream, a meadow surrounded by pine, a ridge with views that went on forever. "Which one do you like best?" Eliza asked one evening as they sat together reviewing the rough maps he'd drawn. "Doesn't matter what I like. This is your choice too." "Then tell me about all of them. Everything you saw." He described each place in detail, painting pictures with his words. The way the light hit the valley in the mornings, the sound of the stream over stones, the wildflowers in the meadow, purple and yellow and white. "The valley," Eliza said when he finished. "That's the one." "You sure?" "I'm sure. It's remote. Nearest town is 2 days' ride. Winters will be hard." "I don't care." She looked at him seriously. "I'm not afraid of hard. I'm only afraid of staying still, of letting life pass me by because I was too scared to reach for something better." Rowan studied her face, then nodded. "The valley it is." They set a departure date, mid-June, when the mountain passes would be clear and the weather stable. As the day approached, Eliza felt a strange mixture of excitement and melancholy. Dead Willow had been her prison for so long, but it was also the only home she'd ever known. The night before they left, the town threw them a farewell dinner. Tables were set up in the street, laden with food people had contributed. There was music, laughter, the kind of warmth that comes from community. Mrs. Callahan pulled Eliza aside at one point, her eyes wet with tears. "I'll miss you, dear. We all will." "I'll miss you too." And Eliza realized she meant it. These people who'd once made her life miserable had become something else entirely. Not quite family, but close. "You write to us sometimes, will you? Let us know how you're doing up there in those wild mountains." "I will. I promise." Sheriff Hewitt limped over, his shoulder still giving him trouble from the wound he'd taken in the fight. "You two take care of each other, you hear? And if you ever need anything, you send word. Dead Willow owes you both more than we can ever repay." "You don't owe us anything," Rowan said, shaking the sheriff's hand. "We did what anyone would do." "No," Hewitt said firmly. "You did what most people can't. You stood up when it counted. That's worth remembering." Pike approached with a large bundle wrapped in canvas. "Wedding present," he said gruffly. "Didn't get a chance to give it to you proper before." Rowan unwrapped it to find a set of tools, a saw, hammer, chisels, all hand-forged and perfectly balanced. "Pike, this is too much." "It's exactly enough. You'll need good tools where you're going. Can't build a life with shoddy equipment." They stayed until late, talking and laughing and saying goodbye to each person individually. When they finally walked back to Eliza's house for the last time, the streets were quiet again, the moon high and bright. "You all right?" Rowan asked, seeing the expression on her face. "Yeah, just thinking about how much has changed. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine leaving this place. Couldn't imagine anyone wanting me enough to build a life with me. And now, here we are." "Here we are," he echoed. "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." They left at dawn. 2 horses, loaded with supplies and everything they'd need to start over. Rowan led the way, Eliza riding beside him, and as Dead Willow disappeared behind them, she didn't look back. There was no point. The past was done. The future was waiting. The journey took 4 days of hard riding through country that grew progressively wilder and more beautiful. They followed old game trails up into the foothills, then higher into the mountains proper. The air thinned, turned crisp and clean. Pine forests gave way to aspen groves, then back to pine again. Rowan pointed out landmarks as they went, a distinctive rock formation that looked like a sentinel, a waterfall that tumbled down a cliff face in a silver ribbon, a meadow where elk grazed in the early morning light. "You've been through here before," Eliza observed. "Once. Years ago, when I was younger and stupider. Thought I might trap up here, make my fortune in furs." He smiled ruefully. "Didn't work out that way." "What happened?" "Realized I didn't have the stomach for it. Killing animals for their pelts. It felt wrong somehow, so I moved on, found other work." "You're softer than you pretend to be." "Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to maintain." She laughed, and the sound echoed off the mountains. On the 4th day, they crested a ridge and Rowan pulled his horse to a stop. "There," he said, pointing down into the valley below. "That's it." Eliza looked, and her breath caught. The valley was perfect. A stream ran through the center, sparkling in the sunlight. Pine forests climbed the slopes on either side, dark green and thick. The valley floor was carpeted with grass and wildflowers, and at the far end the mountains rose up in peaks that still held snow even in summer. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's ours," Rowan corrected, "if you still want it." "I want it." They descended into the valley, picking their way carefully down the slope. When they reached the valley floor, Rowan dismounted and helped Eliza down. "Where should we build?" she asked, looking around at the vast space. "Somewhere with good drainage. Near the water, but not too near, protected from the north wind." He walked the perimeter, examining the land with a practiced eye. Finally, he stopped near a stand of pines on the eastern edge of the valley. "Here, we'll have morning sun, shelter from the weather, easy access to the stream." Eliza stood beside him, imagining it, a cabin, a garden, a life. "Then let's get started." They worked from sunup to sundown every day. Rowan felled trees, trimmed them, notched them for fitting. Eliza helped where she could, hauling smaller logs, stripping bark, learning as she went. It was backbreaking work, harder than anything she'd done in her life, but it was also satisfying in a way the store had never been. Every log they set in place was progress they could see, touch, stand back, and admire. "You're good at this," Rowan said one evening as they sat by their campfire, too exhausted to do anything but eat and rest. "I'm learning," Eliza said, examining her blistered hands. "That's different than being good. You don't complain. You don't quit. That's better than good. That's determination. Learned it from you. No, you had it all along. You just needed a reason to show it." The cabin took shape slowly. 4 walls, a roof frame, spaces left for windows, and a door. It wasn't fancy, wasn't large, but it was solid. It would keep them warm in winter, dry in rain, safe from the elements. While Rowan worked on the cabin, Eliza started a garden near the stream. The soil was rich and dark, perfect for growing. She planted vegetables from the seeds she'd brought, potatoes, carrots, beans, squash. She didn't know if they'd all take, but she tried anyway. "You think we'll make it?" she asked one afternoon, kneeling in the dirt, her hands black with soil. "Make what?" "This. The life we're trying to build. You think it'll work?" Rowan set down the log he'd been shaping and came to sit beside her. "I think we've got as good a chance as anyone. Better than most, considering what we've already been through. What if it's not enough? What if we can't grow enough food, or the winter's too hard, or something goes wrong? Then we'll deal with it. Together. He took her dirty hand in his. Eliza, I can't promise everything will be perfect. I can't promise we won't struggle or that there won't be times when we question this choice. But I can promise I'll be here. I won't run, won't give up. We'll figure it out as we go. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. I'm scared sometimes. Not of the work or the isolation, but of failing, of proving everyone right who said I wasn't capable of more than running a store in a nowhere town. Those people were wrong. They were always wrong. He tilted her face up to look at him. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You faced down armed men, killed to protect yourself, rode into the wilderness to build a new life from nothing. If that's not capable, I don't know what is. You really believe that? I know it. She kissed him then, tasting dirt and sweat and the promise of everything they were building together. By late summer, the cabin was finished. It had 4 rooms, a main living space with a stone fireplace Rowan had built with his own hands, a bedroom, a small storage room, and a workspace where Eliza could preserve food and Rowan could repair tools. The windows had real glass, purchased from a trading post 3 days' ride south. The door was thick pine, hung on iron hinges Pike had forged as part of his wedding gift. The first night they slept in the cabin, Eliza lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds, the wind in the pines, the distant call of an owl, the creak of the wood settling. Can't sleep? Rowan asked beside her. Just taking it in. We did this. We actually did this. We did. He pulled her closer. How does it feel? Like home. Autumn came, and with it, the hard work of preparing for winter. They hunted, and Rowan taught Eliza how to shoot properly, how to track, how to dress, and preserve meat. She was squeamish at first, but she pushed through it, understanding that survival required them both to be capable. They gathered berries, nuts, wild herbs. They dried meat, stored vegetables, cut enough firewood to last months. Every day was work, but it was purposeful work, the kind that meant something. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day of splitting wood, Eliza said, I've been thinking. About? About Dead Willow. About the person I was there. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I spent so long believing what they said about me, that I was plain, unremarkable, destined to be alone. I let their words become my truth. And now? Now I know they were wrong. But more than that, I know I was wrong to believe them. I gave them power over me, let them define who I was. That was my mistake, not theirs. Rowan was quiet for a moment. That's a hard thing to admit. I know, but it's important, because if I don't own my part in it, I can't really move past it. I can't really be free. You're free now. I am. Because I chose to be. Because I stopped waiting for someone else to tell me I was worthy and decided it for myself. She looked at him. You helped with that. You saw me when no one else did. But in the end, I had to choose to see myself. That's the hardest part, Rowan said quietly. I spent years punishing myself for my wife's death, telling myself I didn't deserve to be happy, to love again. It took meeting you to realize I was doing the same thing you were, letting the past define me, letting guilt and fear make my choices. Do you still feel guilty? Sometimes, but not like before. Now it's just a quiet ache, something I carry but doesn't control me. I can remember her without it destroying me. I can love you without feeling like I'm betraying her memory. Eliza reached for his hand. She'd want you to be happy. Anyone who loved you would want that. I think so too. And I think she'd have liked you. Yeah? Yeah. You've got the same kind of strength she had. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't announce itself but holds steady when everything else falls apart. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Winter came hard and fast that year. Snow started falling in late October and didn't stop until March. The valley transformed into a white wilderness, beautiful and brutal. The temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid in the bucket overnight. The wind howled around the cabin, testing every seal, every joint. But the cabin held. It was warm, dry, solid, everything they'd built it to be. The isolation was harder to adjust to than Eliza expected. In Dead Willow, even at her loneliest, there had been people around. Voices, movement, the constant background noise of community. Here, there was only the two of them and the endless quiet of the mountains. You all right? Rowan asked one evening in January. She'd been staring out the window for the better part of an hour, watching snow fall. Just thinking. About? Whether I made the right choice. Coming here. He came to stand beside her. You having doubts? Not doubts exactly, just questions. Like, what if something happens to one of us? What if we get sick or injured and there's no one to help? That's a risk, he admitted, but it's a risk we knew about going in. I know, but knowing something and living it are different things. Is this about more than just the isolation? She turned to face him. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Rowan's eyes went wide, his mouth opening and closing without sound. You're sure? He finally managed. Pretty sure. I'm 2 months late and I've been sick in the mornings. It all adds up. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. A baby. We're going to have a baby. Are you happy? She pulled back to look at his face. Or are you scared? Both. Definitely both. He laughed, the sound shaky. I'm terrified, Eliza. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not a good father? What if you are? What if we both are? That's what you're worried about too, isn't it? Not the isolation, the baby, being out here, so far from help with a child. She nodded. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough? Hey, he cupped her face in his hands. You're the strongest person I know. If anyone can do this, it's you. And you won't be alone. I'll be right here, every step of the way. You promise? I promise. The rest of the winter passed in a blur of preparation. Rowan built a cradle from pine, sanding it smooth so no splinters could catch tender skin. Eliza sewed blankets and tiny clothes from fabric she'd brought with her, her stitches getting smaller and neater with practice. They talked about names, about what kind of life they wanted to give this child, about fears and hopes and dreams. I want them to be brave, Eliza said one night. Not fearless, that's different, but brave enough to face hard things, to stand up for what's right. They will be, Rowan said. Look at their mother. I want them to know they're loved, always, no matter what. They will. That I can guarantee. Spring arrived like a gift, melting the snow, turning the valley green again. Eliza's belly grew round and firm. She felt the baby move for the first time in April, a flutter like wings against her ribs. Here, she said, grabbing Rowan's hand and placing it on her stomach. Feel that? He waited, patient, and then his eyes lit up. I felt it. The baby kicked. They're strong. Like their mother. As her due date approached, Rowan became increasingly anxious. He rode to the nearest town and returned with medical supplies, books on childbirth, anything he could find that might help. You're worrying too much, Eliza told him. I'm worrying exactly the right amount. Women die in childbirth, Eliza, especially out here, without doctors, without... I know the risks, but worrying won't change them. We just have to trust that it'll be all right. How can you be so calm? Because I have to be. One of us needs to keep their head, and it's clearly not going to be you. Despite her words, she was scared too. Late at night, when Rowan was asleep, she'd lie awake thinking about all the things that could go wrong. She'd heard the stories, knew the statistics. Childbirth was dangerous, especially for a first-time mother in her mid-20s with no medical support. But she also knew she had no choice but to face it. Fear wouldn't change what was coming. The baby came in late June, on a morning that started bright and clear. Eliza's water broke just after dawn, and the contractions started soon after. Rowan tried to help, but he was nearly useless, his hands shaking, his face white. Rowan, Eliza said between contractions, I need you to breathe. I am breathing. No, you're hyperventilating. Sit down before you pass out. He sat, then immediately stood again. What can I do? Tell me what to do. Boil water, get the clean linens, and for the love of everything, stay calm. He did as instructed, moving mechanically through the tasks. The contractions grew stronger, closer together. Eliza walked, squatted, tried every position she'd read about. The pain was unlike anything she'd experienced, waves of it that took her breath away. Hours passed. The morning turned to afternoon, the afternoon to evening. Eliza was exhausted, drenched in sweat, her body shaking. I can't do this, she gasped at one point. It's too much. I can't. Yes, you can, Rowan said, kneeling beside her, his voice finally steady. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You can do this. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll deal with it. But nothing is going wrong. You're doing everything right. Just keep going. Just a little more. She pushed, screaming with the effort, and then suddenly there was release. The sound of a baby crying filled the cabin. Rowan caught the infant, his hands sure now, his movements confident. It's a girl, he said, his voice breaking. We have a daughter. He placed the baby on Eliza's chest, and she looked down at the tiny red-faced creature and felt her heart crack open in a way she hadn't known was possible. She's perfect, Eliza whispered, just like her mother. They named her Sarah after Eliza's mother. She was small but healthy, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything. Rowan was completely smitten, holding her for hours at a time, talking to her in a soft voice Eliza had never heard him use before. You're a natural, she told him, watching him rock Sarah to sleep one evening. I'm terrified every second. Welcome to parenthood. The first year with Sarah was hard in ways Eliza hadn't anticipated. The sleepless nights, the constant worry, the physical demands of caring for an infant while also maintaining a homestead. There were times when she felt overwhelmed, times when she cried from exhaustion and frustration. But there were also moments of pure joy. Sarah's first smile, her first laugh, the way she reached for Eliza when she was scared, the way she lit up when Rowan came in from working outside. This is what matters, Eliza said one evening, watching Sarah play on a blanket by the fire. Not the house in town, not what people think, just this, just us. You happy? Rowan asked. Happier than I ever thought possible. Even with the hard parts? Especially with the hard parts. Because they're ours. We chose this life, built it with our own hands. Nobody gave it to us. Nobody can take it away. Over the next few years, their life in the valley became routine. They expanded the cabin, adding another room when Sarah was 2. They cleared more land for the garden, built a small barn for animals. Rowan traded furs and meat in town for things they couldn't make themselves. Eliza taught Sarah to read from the books they'd brought, to identify plants, to understand the rhythms of the natural world. They had a second child when Sarah was 4, a boy they named Thomas, after Rowan's father. And 3 years after that, another daughter, Mary. The cabin that had once felt spacious now felt comfortably full. There was always noise, children playing, laughing, sometimes fighting. There was mess, chaos, the beautiful disorder of family life. Never thought I'd have this again, Rowan said one evening, watching the children play while Eliza cooked dinner. After I lost my first wife, I thought that part of my life was over. I never thought I'd have it at all, Eliza replied. I thought I was destined to be alone. We were both wrong. Best mistake we ever made. As the children grew, Eliza told them stories about Dead Willow, about the town she'd left behind. She told them about the battle with the outlaws, about their father's bravery, about the community that had come together in crisis. Why did you leave if they needed you? Sarah asked when she was old enough to understand. Because sometimes you have to choose between what others need and what you need. And I needed this. I needed to build something that was truly mine, truly ours. Don't you miss it? Sometimes, but I don't regret leaving. Not for a second. They got visitors occasionally. Hewitt rode up once, his limp worse, but his spirit intact. He brought news from Dead Willow, who'd married, who'd died, how the town was rebuilding. They still talk about you two, he said. The heroes who saved the town and then disappeared into the mountains. You're practically legends. Eliza laughed. We're not legends, we're just people trying to live a good life. Maybe that's what legends are, Hewitt said. Just ordinary people who did extraordinary things when it mattered. Pike came once with his son, bringing tools he'd made as gifts for the children. Mrs. Callahan sent letters occasionally, full of town gossip and genuine affection. But mostly, they were alone. And that was how they liked it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Rowan took Eliza on a walk to the ridge above the valley. It was summer, the wildflowers in full bloom, the sky impossibly blue. I wanted to show you something, he said, leading her to a spot where the view opened up over the entire valley. Below, she could see their cabin, smoke rising from the chimney. The garden, lush and green, the barn, the fences, the signs of the life they'd built. I come up here sometimes, Rowan said. when I need to think, or when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I look down at all of that, and I remember. Remember what? How lost I was when I met you. How I thought my life was over, that I'd never be whole again. And then you came along, this quiet, determined woman who saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. You did the same for me. I know, that's what I wanted to say. He turned to face her. We saved each other, Eliza, not in some grand, dramatic way, but in all the small daily ways that actually matter. You gave me a reason to stop running. I gave you a reason to believe in yourself. And together, we built something that neither of us could have built alone. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I can put into words. I love you too, and I'm grateful for every day, every challenge, every moment of this life we've made. They stood there together, looking down at their valley, at the evidence of their choices, their work, their love. You know what I've learned? Eliza said after a while. What? That worth isn't something other people give you? It's something you claim for yourself. For years, I let Dead Willow tell me I was nothing. I believed them because it was easier than believing in myself. But the truth is, I was always worthy. I just had to decide to see it. What changed? You. Meeting you, falling in love with you, it forced me to confront all the lies I'd been telling myself because you saw me clearly, without all the baggage and self-doubt. And eventually, I started to see myself through your eyes. Started to believe that maybe I was worth loving after all. Rowan pulled her close. You are. You always were. I know that now. And I want our children to know it too. I want them to grow up understanding that their worth doesn't depend on what others think, on how they look, on whether they fit some arbitrary standard. They're valuable simply because they exist, because they're human, because they matter. We'll teach them that, Rowan said, every day, in every way we can. They walked back down to the cabin hand in hand. The children came running when they saw them, Sarah carrying Mary, Thomas racing ahead. Mama, Papa, come see what we built, Thomas shouted. He led them to a structure made of sticks and stones, precarious but standing. It's a house, Sarah explained, for when we grow up and have families of our own. Eliza knelt down to examine it. It's beautiful. You did good work. Will you help us make it stronger? Mary asked. Of course. We'll work on it together. That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza and Rowan sat by the fire. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. You ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met? She asked. Sometimes, but not in a way that matters, because we did meet. And everything that came after, that's our story. Do you think it's a good story? I think it's a real story, with struggles and mistakes and moments of doubt, but also with love and courage and the kind of hope that survives even when things get hard. That's better than good. That's honest. Eliza thought about that, about the girl she'd been in Dead Willow, so convinced of her own inadequacy, about the woman she'd become, strong, capable, loved, and loving. The journey between those two versions of herself hadn't been easy or smooth. It had been messy and painful and required her to confront parts of herself she'd rather have ignored. But it had been worth it, because she'd learned that transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself, about shedding the false stories and embracing the truth of who you are. She'd learned that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone willing to grow alongside you, to face hard things together, to choose each other every day, even when it's difficult. She'd learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite the fear, trusting that you're strong enough to handle whatever comes. And most importantly, she'd learned that she was enough. Not because someone else said so, but because she'd decided it was true. The years continued to pass. The children grew, became teenagers with their own thoughts and dreams and questions about the world. Sarah talked about becoming a teacher. Thomas wanted to be a builder like his father. Mary dreamed of traveling, seeing places beyond the mountains. You'd let them go? Rowan asked one evening. Leave the valley? Of course, Eliza said. We built this life for us, but their lives are their own. If they want to see the world, we should encourage them, give them the freedom we claimed for ourselves. Even if it's hard, watching them leave, especially then, because that's what love is, wanting what's best for them, even when it costs us something. When Sarah was 17, she announced she wanted to attend a teaching college in Denver. The news hit Eliza harder than she expected. Her first child, her daughter, leaving. But she smiled and said, "Then we'll figure out how to make that happen." They saved money, sold extra furs, and preserved goods. When the time came, Rowan rode with Sarah to Denver, helped her get settled, made sure she was safe. He came back quieter than he'd left, his eyes red. "She'll be fine," Eliza said, holding him. "She's got your strength and my stubbornness. She'll be more than fine." "I know, but it doesn't make it easier." "Nothing worth doing is easy. We should know that by now." Thomas left 2 years later to apprentice with a builder in Colorado Springs. Mary stayed longer, but eventually she too found her path. Working with a doctor in a small town, learning medicine, finding her purpose. And then it was just Eliza and Rowan again, in the cabin that had once held so much noise and now felt almost too quiet. "Strange, isn't it?" Eliza said one evening. "We started with just the two of us, built all of this, raised 3 children, and now we're back where we started." "Not quite where we started," Rowan said. "We're older, grayer, covered in scars we didn't have before." "Inside and out." "Inside and out," he agreed. "But I wouldn't change it, any of it. Not even the hard parts. Especially not the hard parts. They made us who we are." Eliza looked around the cabin at the marks of their life, the notches on the door frame tracking the children's heights, the quilt she'd sewn from scraps over the years, the chair Rowan had built when his back started giving him trouble. Every object, every mark told a story. "We did good," she said quietly. "Didn't we? We did better than good. We did honest. We did real. We built a life that mattered, raised children who know how to love and work and think for themselves. What more could anyone ask for?" "Nothing," Eliza said. "Absolutely nothing." They received letters from the children regularly. Sarah was thriving at the college, already making a name for herself as an innovative educator. Thomas had started his own building company, was getting married next spring. Mary had helped deliver her first baby, saved a child from pneumonia, was talking about opening her own practice. "They turned out all right," Rowan said, reading the latest letter from Mary. "More than all right. They're remarkable." "They got that from you." "From us," Eliza corrected. "From watching us work together, support each other, choose each other every day." As they grew older, the physical work of maintaining the homestead became harder. Rowan's joints ached in the mornings. Eliza's hands weren't as steady as they used to be. They talked about moving closer to town, maybe finding something easier to manage. But every time they seriously considered it, they'd look around the valley and know they couldn't leave. This was home. This was where they'd built their life, where they'd buried their fears and failures and grown into the people they were meant to be. "We'll manage," Rowan said. "We always do." And they did. They adjusted, found new ways to do old tasks, asked for help when they needed it. Thomas came to visit and helped repair the barn roof. Sarah brought her new husband to meet them, and he proved handy with a hammer. Mary sent medicine and medical supplies, visited when she could. The circle of life continued. On a warm summer evening, 30 years after they'd first arrived in the valley, Eliza and Rowan sat on the porch they'd added to the cabin years before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. "You know what I'm proudest of?" Eliza asked. "What?" "This. That we made it. That we took this crazy leap of faith, built a life from nothing, raised a family, and we're still here. Still together, still choosing each other." Rowan took her hand, his fingers laced with hers. "You know what I'm proudest of?" "What?" "You. Watching you grow from that scared girl in Dead Willow into the woman you are now, strong, confident, unshakable. That's been the privilege of my life. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe, but you did it. You chose to change, to grow, to become. That was all you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Eliza thought about the girl she'd been, the woman she'd become, about the journey between those 2 points, and how it had shaped her into someone she could be proud of. She thought about worth, and how it's never given. It's claimed. How she'd spent so long waiting for someone to tell her she mattered, when the truth was, she'd mattered all along. She just had to decide to believe it. She thought about love and how it's not about perfection. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's hard. It's about seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway. It's about growing together, changing together, building something that's stronger than either person could create alone. She thought about courage and how it's not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. How every hard thing she'd faced, the outlaws, the isolation, childbirth, letting her children go, had required her to be brave. And how each time she'd discovered she was stronger than she knew. But most of all, she thought about choice. About how life isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create. Every day, with every decision, you shape your own story. And while you can't control everything that happens, you can control how you respond. You can choose fear or courage, resignation or hope, bitterness or gratitude. She'd chosen hope. She'd chosen courage. She'd chosen love. And it had made all the difference. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rowan looked at her. "For what?" "For seeing me. For loving me. For building this life with me." "Thank you for the same." They stayed on the porch long after the sun had set, watching the stars wheel overhead, holding hands in the darkness. Two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built something beautiful from nothing, who'd learned that worth isn't given, it's claimed. And in that claiming, in that choosing, they'd found not just love, but themselves. The valley stretched out before them, dark and quiet, home to the life they'd made and the legacy they'd leave behind. And as Eliza sat there, Rowan's hand warm in hers, she knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a single thing. This was her story. Messy, imperfect, real. And it was enough.